What if the king's last words weren't about peace, but about punishment? What if, in the quiet of a hospital room, Charles's dying request wasn't reconciliation with his son, but a demand that his son and daughter-in-law be wiped from the royal record? Imagine the crown itself declaring Harry and Meghan as nothing more than distant footnotes, stripped of their titles, their status, their very place in history. Chilling, isn't it? And yet, that is precisely what has shocked the monarchy, stunned Britain, and left the world in disbelief. Because Princess Anne, Charles's most trusted sibling, has come forward to reveal her brother's final wish. Picture it, the sterile scent of antiseptic in the air, the hum of medical machines keeping rhythm with the shallow breaths of the king. Nurses moving quietly, doctors exchanging cautious glances. Outside, the world waited for news, clinging to whispers about Charles's health. Inside, the air of centuries sat frail and fading, clinging not to life, but to legacy. And when his voice broke through the silence, it carried not words of comfort, but a decree that could reshape royal history forever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Charles's health has been at the center of speculation for months. The palace has downplayed rumors, yet every public appearance reveals a man burdened by more than the crown, by illness, fatigue, and the weight of family betrayal. The cancer diagnosis was never meant to be fully public, but its shadow lingers in every official photo, every strained smile. And now, as reports of his critical state ripple across headlines, the monarchy faces not only the uncertainty of succession, but the question of whether its most infamous couple will finally be erased from within. Why does this matter now? Because Harry and Meghan's existence within the royal framework has been a wound that never healed. From the moment they stepped away, from the Oprah interview to Netflix deals, from accusations to tell-all books, the Sussexes have become a thorn in the side of the crown. And yet, they still hold their titles. Duke and Duchess of Sussex, royal by name, if not by duty. That contradiction has haunted Charles's reign, and it seems he does not want to leave the throne, or this world, with the wound unsealed. But why Anne? Why not Camilla, or William, or even the palace courtiers who have carried the king's secrets for decades? Because Anne is the one person Charles has always trusted to be unflinching, unshakable, unyielding. At 74, she is the no-nonsense sister, the one who never sought the limelight but defended the institution with a soldier's loyalty. And now, she has taken on the role of messenger for a dying king's final wish. Think about it. If Anne, who has weathered scandal after scandal, who stood firm through Diana's storm, Andrew's disgrace, Harry's rebellion, is willing to break her silence and reveal this request, what does that say about the seriousness of Charles's words? This isn't idle gossip. This isn't palace rumor. This is a bombshell carrying the king's seal, delivered by the woman known as the monarchy's steel spine. Of course, not everyone was ready to hear it. Harry and Meghan, thousands of miles away in California, reportedly reacted with disbelief, anger, and something darker, fear. Because titles are not just ceremonial. Titles mean money. Titles mean protection. Titles mean access, influence, prestige. Without them, Harry and Meghan become simply Mr. and Mrs. Windsor Mountbatten, celebrities clinging to past glories. Can you imagine Meghan introducing herself at a Hollywood event as just Meghan Markle? Stripped of the Duchess title, stripped of the glamour of royalty, her carefully curated brand begins to crumble. And for Harry, it is worse, because it is his father's final act of rejection. But pause for a moment. Why now? Why, at the edge of life and death, would Charles focus on Harry and Meghan instead of his legacy, his kingdom, his people? The answer is both simple and devastating. Because Charles knows that leaving the matter unresolved would haunt the monarchy long after he is gone. He knows that William will inherit a throne already heavy with division, scandal, and doubt. By making this request, Charles is attempting to give his heir a clean slate, to cut the cord once and for all, no matter the personal cost. The irony is striking, isn't it? A king, fighting for breath, fighting for time, spends his final energy not on reconciliation, but on severance. Not on healing, but on erasure. And through Anne, that message has been delivered. And here lies the contradiction that has left the nation stunned. For years, Charles was seen as the peacemaker, the one who longed to bridge gaps between his sons. Publicly, he expressed love for Harry. Privately, he allowed Meghan to stand beside them, to walk into the fold, to share in the titles that tradition bestowed. Yet, at the end, when stripped of all pretense, his heart revealed its true demand. Strip them. Remove them. End their chapter. Do you see how this changes everything? Because it's not just a family squabble anymore. It's not just Meghan's interviews or Harry's memoir. This is constitutional, historical, irreversible. The monarchy has always been built on continuity, but Charles's last wish demands rupture. A deliberate break, and Anne, unflinching as ever, has made it clear. So where does this leave us? With questions that cut deep. What will William do with this request? Will he honor it, risking the wrath of his brother and global backlash? Or will he resist, leaving his father's last wish unfulfilled? And Meghan? Will she play the victim once more, or fight tooth and nail to keep her royal ties alive? As the world watches, the palace trembles. The weight of history presses down. And yet, amid the whispers of doctors and the grief of a nation, a single sentence from a frail king could destroy the Sussex legacy forever. And here's the truth no one expected. Charles's wish may already be in motion. Parliamentary whispers have begun. Legal teams have been consulted. The path to stripping titles is complicated, but the will of the monarch carries immense weight, even in his final hours. So, as Princess Anne left that hospital room, her face pale, her steps heavy, the press hounded her with questions. She gave no direct answers, only a sentence that has since shaken the monarchy. The king has spoken, and his wish will be respected. But what did she mean? How far has the machinery already turned? And what happens next, when the truth collides with centuries of tradition? Because the moment Anne stepped into the spotlight with her brother's words, the monarchy's greatest secret became its greatest scandal. And what follows may not just redefine Harry and Meghan. It could redefine the crown itself. But here's the chilling part. What Anne revealed was only the beginning. Because Charles left behind more than words. He left behind evidence. A record. A note that could silence every denial and confirm every suspicion. And when it was finally seen, even William had to admit, nothing would ever be the same. It all began with whispers inside the hospital corridors. Staff moved briskly but quietly, their faces masks of professionalism, yet their eyes betrayed the truth. Something monumental had just been spoken behind closed doors. Not a medical update, not a routine briefing. No, this was different. It was a declaration that sent a ripple of unease through every nurse, every aide, every guard standing watch. Charles, weakened by his illness, had uttered words that would soon escape those walls and echo across the world. Words not of reconciliation, but of erasure. Imagine it. The king, his voice barely steady, speaking not about his own survival, not about his heir, not even about the future of the realm, but about the one son who had already walked away. Why did those words feel so heavy, so impossible, that even the staff hesitated to believe what they heard? Because to hear a father wish for his son to be stripped of his very identity within the monarchy was like hearing the crown itself renounce blood. And yet, those were the words Anne carried with her, etched into her memory, heavy on her lips. The first to sense something was different were the senior courtiers. They had seen Charles in every state, frustrated, tired, joyful, devastated. But never had they seen him like this, resolute, cold, final. When Anne emerged from that private chamber, she carried herself with the same iron dignity she had worn her entire life. And yet, one look at her face was enough. Something had shifted, something irreversible. The corridors of Buckingham Palace, long accustomed to gossip and speculation, quickly became a minefield of half-truths. Did the king really demand that Harry and Meghan's titles be stripped? Was this just a delirious outburst of a man in pain? Or was it the final, deliberate will of a monarch? The lack of immediate clarification only added fuel. Think about how shocking this truly is. For years, the monarchy has tiptoed around Harry and Meghan. Through scandals, interviews, accusations, and Netflix deals, the official line has been restrained silence. Never complain, never explain. That motto has held even as Harry called his stepmother dangerous, even as Meghan accused the firm of cruelty. And yet now, in one sentence from a hospital bed, Charles shattered that silence. And here's where it becomes even more chilling. Charles didn't just speak from bitterness. He spoke with intent. Those close to him reveal that he had already consulted quietly with advisors about the legal pathways for title removal. He had explored options, weighed risks, and considered precedents. This was not the rambling of a sick man. This was the decision of a king. But imagine being, and in that moment, 74 years old, her entire life devoted to service, to loyalty, to protecting the institution. Now, her dying brother places on her shoulders a request so explosive it could ignite a war within the family. She could have stayed silent, could have softened his words, could have let the matter fade into rumor. But, and has never been one to bend or break. She delivered the message exactly as she heard it. And yet, it wasn't just the palace that felt the tremors. Beyond those walls, the press was already circling. Reporters stationed outside the hospital noticed and stern face as she exited. They captured the clipped way she dismissed questions. "The king has spoken," she said, refusing to elaborate. Those 4 words became headlines within hours. But here's the question. Why did Charles choose this moment? Why not months earlier, when he still had the strength to enforce it directly? Why not leave the matter to William, who will inherit the power to act? Some insiders claimed Charles wanted to remove the burden from his son. To ask William to strip his own brother would be cruel. But to make it a dying wish, that reframes it. It becomes not William's choice, but William's duty. And here is where the story takes its first twist. For those in the know, Charles did not simply voice his wish. He left something behind. Notes, instructions, perhaps even a letter intended to be read after his death. Princess, and, it is whispered, carries the knowledge of these documents. Which means this isn't just a verbal request, easy to dismiss. It is written, recorded, preserved, and once revealed, it will be undeniable. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, what does this mean for Harry? A man who once said he longed for his father's love, who publicly admitted he missed his family. To learn that his father's final act was not reconciliation but removal. Can you imagine that pain? For Meghan, it becomes an even sharper wound. She built her global brand on being the Duchess of Sussex. Without that, she becomes ordinary once again, stripped of the fairy tale crown she fought so hard to wear. But before the world could even digest the possibility, the whispers spread faster than wildfire. Courtiers leaked fragments. Parliamentarians hinted at debate. Lawyers were quietly summoned. Behind the facade of royal dignity, machinery was already moving. And if that machinery cannot be stopped, Harry and Meghan's royal chapter may be erased before the king takes his last breath. And yet, the first confrontation was not legal or political, it was personal. Because William, upon hearing of his father's words, was shaken to his core. A man preparing to inherit the throne was suddenly forced to face a choice: loyalty to his father's wish or compassion for his brother. And when William saw what Charles had left behind, the evidence, the note, the undeniable record, he knew nothing would ever be the same. But here's the part no one expected. Those notes, they didn't just mention titles. They contained something deeper, something darker, a line that no one in the family dared speak aloud. And when William read it, the blood drained from his face. Because Charles hadn't only asked for titles to be stripped. He had asked for the Sussex name itself to be removed from royal history. A request that, if carried out, would make Harry and Meghan vanish not just from the present monarchy, but from its very records. And that revelation was enough to send even and into silence. But what came next would change everything, because the first leak of Charles's secret letter didn't come from the palace. It came from an unexpected hand, and once the public saw what was inside, the fury was unstoppable. Loyalty. That single word has defined Princess Anne's entire life. The only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, and has never sought glamour, never chased headlines, never indulged in the drama that consumed her brothers. Instead, she carved her reputation as the workhorse of the monarchy, duty first, everything else second. It's why, when Charles looked around his family in his final days, he turned not to Camilla, not to William, not even to his private secretaries, but to Anne. Because if there is one person who would carry out his wish without hesitation, it is his sister. The public often underestimates Anne. While tabloids obsess over Harry's scandals, Meghan's wardrobe, William and Kate's marriage, or even Andrew's disgrace, and moves quietly in the background, attending hundreds of engagements every year, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, hosting dignitaries. And with those words, she threw fuel on a fire that was already spreading across the nation. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, why would someone leak Charles's private letter? Was it sabotage, designed to weaken the monarchy at its most vulnerable moment? Or was it strategy, intended to prepare the public for the inevitable? Inside sources suggest it may have been deliberate. By leaking just enough, the palace could gauge public reaction before the full storm hit. If outrage was too strong, they could backtrack. If support grew, they could press forward. Either way, Anne's public statement made one thing clear: there would be no backtracking. And this is where the human drama collides with history. For Charles, loyalty to the monarchy outweighed loyalty to his son. For Anne, loyalty to her brother outweighed compassion for her nephew. But for Harry, the message was devastating. His own family had chosen the institution over him. Again, the same choice he claimed broke his mother's heart. Do you see the pattern? History repeating itself, only harsher. Diana once warned that the institution could consume even those it was meant to protect. Now, Anne was proving her right. But here's where the story takes another turn. Because Charles's request didn't just raise questions of loyalty, it raised questions of law. Stripping titles is not a simple act of personal will. It requires parliamentary approval, legal frameworks, constitutional precedent. And Anne knew this, which is why, alongside her public statement, she quietly began consulting senior advisors. The machinery was already being set in motion. And then came the backlash. Not from the public, at least not yet, but from within the family. Reports suggest Prince Edward and Sophie were deeply uneasy. Camilla, too, worried about the optics. Even William, though sympathetic to his father, hesitated at the thought of executing such a brutal command against his own brother. But Anne, she stood firm. She reminded them all that loyalty to the crown had to come before loyalty to kin. Which brings us to the question no one dares say aloud. Was Anne acting purely out of loyalty to Charles? Or was she also protecting herself? Because if Harry and Meghan are allowed to continue using their titles to undermine the monarchy, history will not only judge Charles, it will judge the entire family, and included. To defend her own legacy, she must defend the monarchy's survival. It is this duality, personal loyalty and institutional survival, that makes Anne's role so crucial. And it explains why Charles placed the burden on her shoulders. He knew that when everyone else hesitated, Anne would act. But here's the detail no one expected. Hidden in the leaked letter was not only a demand to strip titles, but a warning. Charles reportedly wrote, "If this is not carried out, the monarchy will not survive their influence." Those chilling words revealed just how deep his fear ran. He believed Harry and Meghan weren't just family rebels. He believed they were an existential threat to the crown itself. And that line, once discovered, changed everything. Because now the stakes weren't just about Harry and Meghan. They were about the future of the monarchy. If Charles saw them as a threat to survival, then stripping their titles became not just a personal wish, but a matter of national security. But here's the cliffhanger that no one saw coming. Just as Parliament began quietly debating the legality of such a move, another leak surfaced. This one even more devastating. A second page of Charles's letter. And this page didn't just name Harry and Meghan. It hinted at others. Others whose titles, Charles believed, should also be reconsidered. And when that second page reached the press, the storm that followed threatened to tear the monarchy apart. Once upon a time, it was a fairy tale. A young prince, the so-called spare, long seen as the cheeky, rebellious younger brother, finally found love. The world watched as Harry walked down the aisle with Meghan Markle, the glamorous actress from California. The wedding in 2018 was broadcast to millions, a modern Cinderella story wrapped in royal tradition. In that moment, Harry and Meghan were not outsiders, not rebels, not villains. They were the shining future of a monarchy striving to look relevant in the 21st century. And with that wedding came the glittering gift, titles. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Not just ceremonial honors, but symbols of belonging, of acceptance. The Queen herself bestowed them. It was the crown's way of saying, you are part of us. You are protected. You are royal. But how quickly fairy tales unravel. Barely a year after their marriage, whispers began. Meghan wasn't adapting to the strict royal hierarchy. Harry seemed restless, frustrated, haunted by old wounds. The press seized on every detail. The alleged feud between Meghan and Kate, Harry's anger at intrusive coverage, Meghan's tears in interviews. The honeymoon glow faded into bitter reality. And when Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from royal duties in 2020, the monarchy was rocked to its core. Think about it. Royals don't just quit. Duty is meant to be lifelong, unshakable, inherited with blood. Yet here was the Queen's grandson, declaring independence, turning his back on tradition. And worse still, demanding financial freedom while still clinging to titles that symbolized royal privilege. This contradiction, leaving the monarchy but keeping the prestige, was the seed of today's crisis. Because titles are more than names. They are brands. They open doors to billion-dollar opportunities. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex weren't just a married couple from California. They were global icons, leveraging centuries of royal history to build their empire. Ask yourself, would Netflix have signed a multi-million-dollar deal with plain Harry and Meghan Windsor? Would Spotify have shelled out fortunes for podcasts by Mr. and Mrs. Markle? Of course not. It was the royal shine, the Duchess sparkle, that turned their ventures into headlines. And Charles knew it, and knew it. Even William knew it. And yet, through it all, the palace remained silent. The Queen, in her quiet grace, allowed Harry and Meghan to keep their titles even as they fled to America. Some saw it as mercy. Others saw it as weakness. But Charles, now facing his mortality, saw it as a mistake that must be corrected. The turning point came with the Oprah interview. Meghan, seated beneath the Californian sun, accusing the firm of cruelty, racism, and neglect. Harry, echoing her pain, likening royal life to a prison. In those 2 hours, decades of royal mystique were shattered. And yet, even as they lambasted the monarchy, they introduced themselves as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Do you see the irony? They tore the institution apart while using the very titles it had granted them. To Charles and Anne, that was betrayal layered with hypocrisy. And betrayal cannot be forgiven, not when it undermines centuries of carefully maintained dignity. But the story didn't end there. Harry's memoir, Spare, twisted the knife deeper. Page after page of accusations, confessions, and grievances. He revealed family arguments, mocked his father's quirks, and painted his brother as cold and ruthless. Every word was another blow to the crown's image. And yet again, the book's cover didn't simply say Harry Windsor. It screamed, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. The title gave his story legitimacy. Without it, would the world have cared as much? This is why Charles's last wish carries such devastating force. To strip Harry and Meghan now would not only silence their claim to royal authority, it would expose the contradiction they've built their entire empire upon. They left the monarchy, but they didn't leave the brand. Take away the titles, and what remains? Just another celebrity couple in Hollywood, competing with actors, singers, influencers. No crown, no cachet, no unique allure. And here's the bitter truth. Harry and Meghan know this. Behind closed doors, they fought fiercely to hold on to their titles. Sources whisper that Meghan considers the Duchess title her shield, her ultimate achievement, the proof she made it into the most exclusive club on earth. Losing it would be a personal humiliation, a public declaration that she was rejected by the very institution she once claimed had caged her. For Harry, it's even more painful. Titles are not just about prestige, they are identity. From birth, he was Prince Harry. To imagine a world where he is stripped down to a civilian name is to imagine a world where his entire upbringing has been erased. Worse, it would be his father's final rejection. Not just, "You are not my heir," but, "You are not my son in this institution at all." But here's where it grows even darker. Remember the leaked letter? Insiders claim Charles specifically wrote that the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex had become weapons against the monarchy, that they had been wielded not in service, but in sabotage, and weapons must be disarmed. This revelation, once leaked, ignited a storm. Newspapers debated whether the monarchy had the legal right to act. Politicians weighed in, some calling it justified, others calling it cruel. And the public? Divided. In Britain, many applauded the idea. In America, where Harry and Meghan built their empire, outrage grew. But through it all, one fact became unavoidable. The very titles that once elevated Harry and Meghan are now the chains tightening around them. The irony is almost poetic. What once gave them power may now become their downfall. And this is where the cliffhanger sharpens. Because as debates raged, as and pressed forward with Charles's last wish, lawyers unearthed a shocking precedent. One buried in the annals of royal history. A precedent that proves titles can be stripped, but at a cost so great it once nearly destroyed the monarchy. And if that precedent is invoked again, Harry and Meghan's fate may already be sealed. Stripping royal titles sounds simple, doesn't it? A king makes a wish, and it is done. But the truth is far more complicated. Titles in Britain are not just names passed around like party favors. They are legal instruments, tied to centuries of constitutional law, parliamentary precedent, and deeply entrenched tradition. And for a monarch to demand their removal, especially from his own son and daughter-in-law, is to awaken a sleeping giant of legal and political battle. So how does it work? Let's peel back the layers. First, there is a difference between royal titles and peerage titles. Prince and princess are royal styles, granted by the sovereign under letters patent. Dukedoms, such as Sussex, are peerages, and while they too originate from the sovereign, once granted, they are not easily undone. That is the crux of the challenge. Historically, the stripping of titles has been rare and explosive. The most famous example is King Edward VIII, who abdicated the throne in 1936 to Mary Wallis Simpson. After his abdication, he was made Duke of Windsor, but his wife was denied the style of Her Royal Highness. That single denial sparked bitterness that haunted the Windsors for decades. A reminder that titles are not just formalities, they carry deep personal wounds when withheld. Another precedent came in 1917, during World War I. George V, faced with rising anti-German sentiment, issued a royal decree stripping German relatives of their British titles. It was a bold move that severed ties with entire branches of the family. But that was wartime. That was politics. Charles's request, by contrast, is deeply personal, aimed not at foreign enemies, but at his own blood. More recently, we saw a shadow of this with Prince Andrew. Amid scandal and disgrace, Andrew was stripped of military titles and royal patronages in 2022. Yet even then, he retained his dukedom, Duke of York. Why? Because removing a peerage requires an act of parliament. The monarchy may wield influence, but it cannot simply erase a peerage with a wave of the royal hand. That's the constitutional reality. And this is where Charles's wish collides with law. If Harry and Meghan are to be stripped of Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Parliament must pass legislation. It would spark fierce debates, attract global scrutiny, and potentially split political parties. Some would argue it's justice. Others would accuse the monarchy of vindictiveness. Either way, it would not be quiet. But here's the twist. Charles anticipated this. Sources claim he consulted with senior advisors about the parliamentary path months ago, before his illness worsened. He wanted to know, could it be done? And the answer, while legally possible, came with a chilling caveat. Yes, Parliament could revoke the titles. But in doing so, it would open the door to broader debates about the monarchy itself. If lawmakers are asked to strip Harry and Meghan, what's to stop them from questioning the entire institution? What's to stop them from challenging the crown's role in modern Britain? Do you see the danger? By trying to silence his son, Charles could inadvertently weaken the very monarchy he is trying to protect. It is a gamble, one that could either restore dignity or accelerate decline. And yet, the king was resolute. His letter reportedly stated, "The crown cannot be mocked from within. Titles must serve the monarchy, not attack it." Strong words, leaving little doubt about his intent. But beyond law, beyond Parliament, there lies another obstacle: blood. The monarchy is not just a legal machine. It is a family, a fractured, wounded, deeply complicated family. And while Parliament may be persuaded, while advisors may strategize, what happens when the decision cuts directly into flesh and blood? Consider William. For him, the question is more than political. It is personal. Harry is not just another duke. He is his brother. They once walked side by side through Diana's funeral, bonded in grief, united by shared pain. To strip Harry now would feel like betrayal layered upon betrayal. And yet, William also knows that as future king, he must uphold his father's wish. To ignore Charles's final request would be seen as weakness. To honor it would fracture his last tie to his brother. And then there's Anne. For her, blood has never outweighed duty. She has shown time and again that the survival of the monarchy trumps personal ties. But even she must have felt the sting when Charles asked her to play executioner against her own nephew. Imagine the conflict: love for family versus loyalty to the institution. And yet, Anne chose the crown. The same cannot be said for everyone. Reports suggest Edward, often quiet and reserved, expressed unease. He questioned whether the family could endure yet another public split. Camilla, too, is said to have urged caution, warning that stripping titles could turn Harry and Meghan into martyrs. The palace is divided, torn between loyalty to Charles and fear of the consequences. And then there's the public. While many in Britain support the idea of stripping the Sussexes, others see it as cruel, even dangerous. Let them fade away naturally, some say. Why give them more publicity? But Charles disagrees. To him, silence is complicity. Allowing Harry and Meghan to keep their titles while they attack the monarchy is like arming one's enemy. Here's the irony. In trying to protect the monarchy, Charles may ignite a storm that tears it further apart. And, carrying his wish, knows this better than anyone. Yet she presses on, because once spoken, a king's dying wish cannot be ignored. But here comes the cliffhanger, the part no one expected. In the course of examining precedents and preparing legal arguments, advisors stumbled upon an obscure case buried in 19th century history. A case where a royal was not only stripped of titles, but legally declared severed from the line of succession altogether. And when this precedent was placed before Anne, the implications became terrifying. Because if invoked, it wouldn't just remove Harry and Meghan's titles. It could remove Harry himself from the royal bloodline. For Prince William, the news hit like a thunderclap. His father's dying wish was not reconciliation, not peace, not healing for a fractured family. It was eradication, the removal of his brother's titles, and possibly even his place in the royal bloodline. William sat in silence when Anne delivered the words. Those close to him described his face as stone, but his eyes betrayed a storm raging within. He had prepared himself for many outcomes. Charles could have asked for guidance, for prayers, for promises of continuity. But this? To strip Harry, to cast him into the wilderness? Even for a man hardened by duty, it was almost too much to bear. Think about it. William and Harry were once inseparable, brothers bound by tragedy. The two boys who walked behind Diana's coffin, their young faces etched into the world's memory. For decades, the bond seemed unbreakable. Yes, they quarreled. Yes, their paths diverged. But deep down, many believed they would always find their way back to one another. Now, Charles's wish threatened to seal that door forever. Inside Kensington Palace, William wrestled with questions no heir should have to face. Should he honor his father's dying request and carry out the brutal act of stripping his brother's identity? Or should he resist, risking accusations of weakness and disloyalty to the monarchy? Whichever path he chose, the consequences would be catastrophic. And yet, William's torment was only beginning. Because Anne had more to reveal. She handed him a sealed folder. Inside, William found what Charles had left behind: evidence, notes, letters, drafts, perhaps even a statement intended for the public. This was not just a wish spoken on a hospital bed. This was a carefully considered plan, laid out in black and white. William's hands trembled as he unfolded the documents. Each word cut deeper than the last. Charles had written with clarity, with purpose, with an icy determination that left no room for doubt. The titles of Sussex have become weapons, one line read. They are no longer honors, but instruments of harm. They must be withdrawn. Another page contained something even more chilling: a plea to Parliament. Charles had drafted language for a potential bill, urging lawmakers to support the removal of Harry and Meghan's peerages. He had even cited the precedent of George V's wartime decree. This was not the rambling of a sick man. This was strategy. This was intent. But then, William's eyes fell on a final page, and what he read drained the color from his face. It was a personal note, handwritten, addressed not to Parliament, not to Anne, but to William himself. "My son," it began, "you will inherit a kingdom burdened by division. You cannot carry both the crown and your brother's betrayal. One must give way. If you love this monarchy, you will act. If you love your brother more than the crown, then you will destroy what I have spent my life protecting." Can you imagine the weight of those words? A father, forcing his son to choose between blood and duty, between the brother he once shared everything with, and the crown he was born to inherit. It was a cruel ultimatum, one only a king could impose. For hours, William paced the room, the letter clutched in his hand. Memories flooded back. Childhood laughter with Harry. Late-night talks in their 20s. Harry's wedding day, when William stood beside him as best man. Then darker memories. The Oprah interview. Harry's accusations and spare. The moments when trust shattered, when love turned into rivalry. The contradiction tore at him. He still loved his brother, but he also knew the damage Harry and Meghan had done to the monarchy. The interviews, the books, the relentless criticism. Could the crown survive more of it? Those close to William say he was visibly shaken. For the first time, the man known for composure, for stoic dignity, allowed himself to break. He wept, not the quiet tears of public funerals, but the raw sobs of a man cornered by destiny. He whispered to aides, "How can I choose? How can any son choose this?" But the clock was ticking. Charles's health was worsening, and was pressing for action. Parliament was circling. The world was waiting. And William, whether ready or not, was about to step into the fire. And here's where the story twists yet again. Because William wasn't the only one who saw the evidence. Meghan did too. Somehow, through whispered leaks or calculated channels, the Sussex camp obtained fragments of Charles's letter. And when Meghan read them, she exploded. "This is war," she reportedly told a confidant. "If they strip us, I will destroy them." Strong words, but words consistent with Meghan's history of fighting back. If Charles wanted Harry and Meghan erased, Meghan was determined to ensure the monarchy would bleed for it. And that is precisely what terrified William. Because now it wasn't just about family. It wasn't just about law. It was about survival. His father's last wish had triggered a battle that could consume the monarchy itself. But the most haunting question remained. Could William ever forgive himself if he carried out the wish? Could he look his brother in the eye, knowing he was the executioner of Harry's royal identity? Or worse, could he forgive himself if he defied his father's dying command and watched the monarchy crumble as a result? The weight of history pressed down on him. The future king stood on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss. And then, in the quiet of that night, he whispered a single sentence that chilled even his closest aides. "If I do this," William said, "Harry will never forgive me. But if I don't, my father will never rest in peace." And with those words, the heir to the throne stepped into a nightmare. Because what came next would pit brother against brother, blood against blood. And when the truth of Charles's evidence was revealed to the entire family, the storm inside the palace became a hurricane. Meghan Markle has always been many things to many people. To some, she was the modern fairy tale princess, an American actress swept into royalty by love. To others, she was a disruptor, challenging centuries-old traditions and exposing the monarchy's shadows. But to Meghan herself, she was proof that an outsider could break through the most impenetrable walls of privilege. And that proof came with a title, Duchess of Sussex. Imagine the power of that transformation. Just years before, Meghan was known for suits, red carpet appearances, and lifestyle blogging. Hollywood respected her, but she was not an A-lister. Then came the wedding at Windsor, and in a single day she went from Meghan Markle to Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. That title elevated her to a global stage she had never known before. It wasn't just status, it was brand gold. Every headline, every introduction, every contract leaned on it. Now imagine being told that all of it could be taken away. That the title she fought for, the title that legitimized her place in history, was about to be stripped as her father-in-law's dying wish. Those close to Meghan say she was stunned at first. Then came anger. Then came fear. Because Meghan knows better than anyone. In the cutthroat world of Hollywood, relevance is everything. Without the Duchess title, without the sheen of royalty, she risks becoming ordinary again. And for someone who has built her empire on being extraordinary, that is unthinkable. Her fury, insiders claim, was volcanic. "They can't do this to me," she allegedly told a confidant. "I am the mother of a prince and princess. They can't erase that." But the truth is, they can. Titles can be revoked. Styles can be stripped. History can be rewritten. And Meghan knew it. This is where her perspective becomes crucial. To Meghan, the monarchy was not a sacred institution. It was a system she once accused of cruelty, racism, and neglect. Yet, paradoxically, it was also the very system that made her who she is today. She denounced it, but she depended on it. Without it, she is simply Meghan Markle again. Can you see the contradiction? She built her narrative on escaping the monarchy, yet clings fiercely to the titles it gave her. That contradiction may now be her undoing. But Meghan has never been one to back down. For every attack, she has fought back with interviews, documentaries, memoirs, podcasts. Each time the monarchy thought she was silenced, she returned louder. And now, faced with total erasure, she was ready to unleash her most dangerous weapon yet. What is that weapon? Information. Secrets. Stories untold. Meghan has always hinted that she knows more than she has shared. "If I spoke everything I knew," she once said, "it would be devastating." Those words, once dismissed as exaggeration, now hang over the monarchy like a sword. Imagine the threat. If stripped of her titles, Meghan could go public with claims so damaging they might shatter what remains of the royal family's dignity. She has already accused them of racism. What more could she reveal? Financial secrets? Private conversations? Hidden affairs? The possibilities are endless, and the palace knows it. Harry, too, has ammunition. In Spare, he gave the world a glimpse into his pain, but he also held back. There are stories he never printed, details he never shared. Meghan knows this, and together, they could release a second wave of revelations, timed perfectly to coincide with Charles's wish being carried out. This is Meghan's last card, her nuclear option. But here's the irony. Using it could destroy not just the monarchy, but also Harry and Meghan themselves. If they unleash everything, they risk being seen not as victims, but as vengeful opportunists. Public sympathy could curdle into disdain. Even Hollywood, which thrives on scandal, may turn its back if the couple are perceived as burning every bridge for personal gain. So Meghan faces her own impossible choice. Fight back and risk her credibility, or stay silent and risk her relevance. And in the middle of it all stands Harry. Torn between his wife's fury and his father's rejection, he finds himself trapped. Friends say he is devastated, oscillating between anger and grief. "Why now?" he reportedly asked. "Why at the end of his life would my father do this?" The question haunts him. But here's the haunting answer. Because Charles believes it is the only way to protect the monarchy for William. And Meghan knows it, which is why she has shifted her fury from Charles to William himself. In her mind, William holds the power now. If he honors his father's wish, Meghan will never forgive him. And that is where the family fracture becomes unrepairable. William versus Harry was one thing, but Meghan versus William is another. The future king against the Duchess determined not to bow. Two forces colliding with the crown itself in the balance. The press has already picked up the battle lines. British tabloids paint Meghan as grasping, desperate, clinging to her titles. American outlets frame her as a victim of royal cruelty, unfairly targeted by a dying king. Public opinion is polarized, and the stage is set for a showdown unlike anything the monarchy has faced since Edward VIII's abdication. And then came Meghan's whispered threat, the one that rattled even her closest allies. "If they erase me," she reportedly said, "I will erase them." What did she mean? No one knows for certain. But palace insiders fear she is holding stories so explosive, so incendiary, that their release could cause irreparable harm. Which brings us to the cliffhanger. Because just as Meghan's fury boiled over, just as she began preparing her counterattack, another message emerged from inside the palace. This one not from Charles, not even from William, but from Camilla. And when Meghan learned what Camilla had privately said about her, the rage reached new heights. The walls of Buckingham Palace have always had ears. Long before emails and text leaks, secrets traveled in whispers carried by footmen, courtiers, and aides. What is said in the drawing rooms rarely stays confined. And now, in the shadow of Charles's illness and Anne's revelation, the staff became the unseen narrators of a monarchy in crisis. Inside those halls, loyalty was splintered. Some whispered their support for Anne's firmness, calling it necessary to protect the crown. "Enough is enough," one senior aide reportedly muttered. "They've profited from the monarchy while poisoning it. The king is right, it must end." But others were uneasy. Younger aides, particularly those who joined during Harry and Meghan's years as working royals, felt conflicted. They remembered Meghan's charm at public engagements, Harry's laughter with children, the excitement that once buzzed around the Sussex brand. To them, the idea of stripping titles felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. "It's Diana all over again," one aide whispered. "A woman crushed by the institution, punished for speaking her truth." And that name, Diana, lingered like a ghost in the corridors. For years, the specter of Princess Diana has haunted the monarchy. Her warmth, her charisma, her defiance of protocol, and her tragic end. Both Harry and William have spoken of how her loss scarred them. Harry, especially, framed his rebellion as a continuation of her struggle against the system. And now, as Charles's wish threatened to erase him, Diana's legacy became a weapon wielded by whispers. She would never have allowed this, one palace insider remarked. Diana would have fought tooth and nail to protect her sons. To see one of them stripped, erased, it would have broken her heart. Imagine how those words cut through the palace like knives. Because if Diana's name entered the debate, the narrative changed completely. Charles's last wish stopped looking like justice and began to look like vengeance. And vengeance is not a trait Britain admires in its monarchs. For William, Diana's shadow complicated everything. He has long sought to balance her memory with his duty. He honors her compassion, but rejects her war against the institution. Still, how could he strip his brother of titles without feeling the ghost of his mother staring back at him? The public would ask the question, and William knew it. What would Diana have wanted? And Meghan? Oh, she seized on Diana's memory like flint to fire. Friends say she spoke often of Diana, portraying herself as the new outsider silenced by the firm. "They destroyed her," Meghan reportedly said, "and now they're trying to destroy me." Whether the comparison is fair or not, it resonates emotionally. And emotion is Meghan's greatest weapon. The whispers didn't stop with Diana's name. Staff remembered moments when Harry openly linked Meghan to his mother's fate. "I lost my mother," he said once in an interview, "and I'm not going to lose my wife." That line, replayed endlessly on television, became a rallying cry. Now, with Charles's wish hanging like a sword, the parallel was unavoidable. Would stripping Meghan's title be another institutional attack that echoed Diana's suffering? And here's where the palace divided into two camps. The old guard, courtiers loyal to tradition, dismissed the comparison. Diana was the mother of a future king, one said. Meghan is not. The situations are worlds apart. But the younger staff disagreed. They saw history repeating, with another woman painted as difficult, silenced by the machine, and cast aside when inconvenient. This tension spread outward. The media, quick to exploit any crack, began running headlines. Would Diana approve of Charles's final wish? Talk shows debated the question endlessly. Diana's old friends weighed in. Some defended Charles, saying he was protecting the monarchy. Others said Diana would be horrified to see one of her sons punished so publicly. The debate grew louder by the day, dragging Diana's memory into a battle she could never have imagined. And then came the most chilling whisper of all. A senior aide, close to Charles in his final days, claimed the king himself had invoked Diana's name. According to this source, Charles confided, she would understand. She fought the institution, but she loved her sons. I must protect one, even if it means losing the other. That sentence, if true, reveals everything. Charles believed he was honoring Diana by securing William's throne, even if it meant sacrificing Harry. But imagine how Harry would feel hearing that. His mother's name used to justify his erasure. It's the ultimate twist of the knife. And it raises a terrifying question. If Diana's memory is being weaponized in this battle, who truly owns it? William, who seeks to honor her with stability. Harry, who sees himself as her rebel heir. Or Meghan, who casts herself as Diana's modern reincarnation. The answer may decide not just titles, but the very survival of the monarchy's reputation. Because the British public has never forgiven the institution for Diana's suffering. If they believe history is repeating itself, sympathy may shift once again, away from the crown and toward the outcasts. And knew this, which is why she worked harder than ever to keep the debate framed as loyalty versus betrayal, not institution versus compassion. But the whispers were growing louder, and it could not silence Diana's ghost. And then, the unthinkable happened. One of Diana's old letters, long kept in private, surfaced in the media. A letter where she wrote about her fears for her son's future. A letter where she questioned whether the institution will ever truly protect Harry. When the press published those words, the impact was seismic. Crowds outside Buckingham Palace held up photos of Diana, chanting her name. Commentators declared that the monarchy was repeating its greatest mistake. And inside the palace, silence fell. For the first time, Charles's last wish looked less like a royal decree and more like a curse repeating itself through generations. But the shock was not over. Because buried in that same collection of letters was a line few expected to see. Diana had written, "The truth will come out one day, and it will involve secrets the monarchy cannot afford to keep." And when and read that line, she froze. Because suddenly, the whispers about Diana were not just about memory. They were about secrets. Secrets that, if connected to Charles's wish, could tear the monarchy apart. If the palace walls whispered, the press shouted. And once the story of Charles's last wish reached the media, there was no turning back. The British tabloids, ever hungry for scandal, erupted like volcanoes. Headlines screamed across front pages. King's last betrayal, Harry erased, Duchess doomed, Meghan to lose everything, and carries Charles's bombshell demand. The tone was unmistakable, triumphant, vengeful, even gleeful. For years, the tabloids had waged war against Meghan, painting her as manipulative, ambitious, and ungrateful. Now, they framed Charles's wish as the monarchy finally striking back. Justice at last, one columnist wrote. The Sussex circus is over. But across the Atlantic, the narrative flipped. American outlets rushed to Meghan's defense. Cruelty in the crown, one paper declared. Talk shows debated whether Meghan was the victim of a dying king's bitterness. On social media, hashtags like #StandWithMeghan and #DianaWouldn'tApprove trended. Influencers, celebrities, and activists voiced outrage. For every tabloid headline cheering her downfall, there was a viral tweet declaring solidarity. And then came the firestorm on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Videos comparing Meghan's plight to Diana's went viral. Clips from old interviews resurfaced. Diana's warning about the firm, Meghan's tearful confessions to Oprah, Harry's insistence he wouldn't let history repeat itself. Millions of viewers debated, dissected, and dramatized the story. The battle lines were drawn. Britain versus America. Tradition versus modernity. The monarchy versus Meghan. But here's where it gets darker. The media frenzy wasn't just noise, it was fuel. Every headline, every segment, every trending hashtag intensified the pressure on Buckingham Palace. And knew this, and she decided to use it. In a rare move, and stepped out publicly once again. Cameras flashed as she left a meeting with senior courtiers, her face as unreadable as stone. Reporters shouted questions. Would Harry and Meghan lose their titles? Was this truly the king's last wish? And, in her famously blunt style, answered with a single line. The monarchy must endure. No elaboration, no denial, just 5 words. And yet, those words carried the weight of centuries. For the tabloids, it was confirmation and was preparing the ground for Harry and Meghan's erasure. For Meghan's supporters, it was evidence of cruelty, proof that the monarchy valued survival over family. The frenzy only grew. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some holding signs reading "Justice for Diana" and "Hands off Meghan." Others held Union Jacks and cheered, demanding the monarchy strip the traitors. Britain had not seen such division over the royals since Diana's funeral. And yet, amid the chaos, and remained calm, calculated. Observers noted that every word she spoke seemed carefully chosen. She wasn't ranting. She wasn't emotional. She was deliberate. Some even suggested that and was revealing Charles's wish in stages, dropping carefully measured hints to acclimate the public before the final blow. But then came the moment no one expected. During a quiet press briefing, and let slip something new, something the palace had not yet acknowledged. She referred not just to titles, but to records. His Majesty, she said, believes the records must reflect truth. Titles and honors must align with loyalty. The word records sent shockwaves. Did she mean the official royal archives? Did Charles want Harry and Meghan not only stripped of titles, but erased from the very documents of monarchy? If so, it would be unprecedented, rewriting history to exclude a living son of the king. British tabloids seized it instantly. Harry to be deleted from history books. American outlets blasted back. Monarchy goes Orwellian, erasing Harry and Meghan. And the public? Outrage, fascination, horror. The firestorm became a hurricane. This is where the emotional stakes soared. Imagine being Harry, waking up in California to headlines suggesting his own father wanted him erased from history. Imagine being Meghan, realizing the Duchess title she fought for could vanish, leaving her children's legacy in question. Would Archie and Lilibet still be recognized as prince and princess? Or would they, too, be stripped in the process? The questions piled higher and higher, and answers were nowhere to be found. Social media turned savage. Memes mocked the Sussexes. Fan accounts defended them. Hashtags like #erase the Sussexes clashed with #end the monarchy. It wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a culture war. And Anne, she stayed silent after her cryptic comment, retreating into the palace. But her silence only fueled speculation. Reporters swarmed Parliament, demanding answers. Was legislation being prepared? Were lawyers drafting the framework for title removal? Every MP who walked through Westminster was hounded with questions. Some dodged. Some admitted there were discussions. The uncertainty only made the frenzy grow. And then, just when the press thought they had the story cornered, another revelation exploded. A leaked memo surfaced. Not from Parliament, not from courtiers, but from a historian tied to the royal archives. The memo suggested that steps were already being taken to review how the Sussex chapter would be recorded in future official documents. It was subtle, it was cautious, but the implication was there. History itself was being rewritten in real time. For the monarchy, this was strategy. For Harry and Meghan, it was annihilation. And that is when Meghan's camp fired back. Quietly, through allies in the American press, they floated their own revelation. Meghan had kept diaries. Detailed, personal, emotional diaries from her time inside the palace. And if she were erased, those diaries could become her weapon, a devastating insider account to counter every attempt at silencing her. The message was clear. If the palace erased her, she would write herself back into history on her own terms. But the palace wasn't finished either, because it still held one more piece of Charles's final wish. A detail darker than anything revealed so far. And when she chose to reveal it, the entire royal narrative would tilt again.